back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
I think I did it. My hands sweaty. I've never been so tense on a mouse in my life. I hope that's kind of worked. And thank you for joining Education Tonight on the 27th of February, 2025. Spring's in the air. We're getting there, aren't we? A few light nights walking home.
Yeah, it was nice. It was the last couple of mornings have been a little, chilly, but the sun's been out. The flowers are starting to bloom. Half term is over, so we're into the spring term. It's good. It's good. It is the turning. Definitely has a feeling of a spring in the air, and it's nice. I like this time of the year because you've got fresh new life. The daffodils are out, and yeah, you can see the leaves are starting to bud in the trees. There's just new life introduced into the world. So spring's always a cool time.
Yeah. It's just that kind of little bit of daybreak, and I think it just lightens the mood. You see, everyone just reacts differently. Certainly in Derbyshire over the last couple of days, we've had really blazing sunlight through, and it's just I feel like everyone's spirit's just got a little bit of a lift. We're going into, it's quite a challenging times for schools because a lot of subjects are finishing off coursework. Students are starting to see kind of exam timetables come out. That first bit of anxiety around their exam dates actually coming on. We've counted, I do the T level, and one of our courses, essentially in 5 days' time, they're sitting their main assessment. It's a 2-week assessment, and then they're essentially done. So that's kind of one class kind of wrapped up already. And then it goes into kind of English, maths, resits kind of quite quickly after Easter. And that journey really kind of rackets up to June, doesn't it? Before the main bulk of the main examinations.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's I counted a number around 10 weeks till my exam, a number of lessons I have left. And what's really good is, the kids are sort of, they're toning out my monologue and kind of preaching and one is like, I'm just going to let you're in the background, sir. You're like a podcast. One of my very sophisticated kids there said, it's like, listen to the podcast, sir. You just do your thing. I'm just going to get on with this work here. And I'm like, are you tuning me out? No, I'm picking up on some of it. I was like, these people are going business. So I'm really pleased with it. They've got that business head on them and they've counted down and they're doing lots of revision. And we often hear about, these kids these days, but I actually think the amount of work that the kids get through, they're very frugal with their time in the sense. I think they're definitely a lot more organized in many ways, and their lives are a lot busier than our lives used to be. And that's the tough thing about the mental side of it, and about fatigue and exam fatigue. So it always is the time of the year where parents might see their children start to get a little bit sort of pent up and frustrated and angry. And I just don't think we examine children at 15, 16, it's right. I think all the evidence points to, I think it's the wrong time. I think, their brains have just been rewired. Hormones are kicking in. There's a maturity gap, I think, definitely between boys and girls. And why are we still doing GCSEs at 15, 16? We used to do terminal exams at 16 because you finished your exams, you went into the world of work or you went into the world of education. But that's no longer the case in the world. So why are we still inherited a system which, decided at 16 if you spent the next 40 odd years working as a clockmaker or in a factory, or whether you spend the next 40 years working in a building site, or where you spend, a couple of years getting a professional degree and then spending those 40 odd years. That world is gone, but yet we're still locked into an exam system that hasn't, I don't think, evolved. And then worse than that,
we've said this a few times, haven't we? It's kind of classic kind of Education Tonight territory. We've covered everything from kind of how outdated it is. We've also done shows, remember, on kind of the absurdity of the UK and its weather, and pitching children in the hall at the hottest time of the year when it's almost unbearable to do anything. But we've got a busy show tonight coming up. Me and Brent are going to do a kind of a build up to this, because there's a lot to kind of get through, but we're really pleased that we've got Daniel Kebede, who's going to be joining us from 8:30. So please, if you have any comments or any thoughts about the upcoming kind of ballots and strike actions, we'd really like to hear from you tonight, because Daniel's going to be on.
And we thought there's 2 days, in 2 days' time, that they're going to be balloting their members. So we thought it was a perfect opportunity to get Daniel on to sort of outline the potential of, okay, here we go again. Is it strike action? What's the rationale behind it, to explain what the unions are, protesting, going to be potentially balloting about? What's the context of it? So we thought the timing of that was very apt, that ballot is geared up for the next 2 days. And it's an indicative ballot, obviously not a full one. So it's a bit of a testing to see what's going on. So we'll have a few other questions for Daniel, obviously, but a few other things in education. But the primary thing that we want to have a chat about is the potential of strike action, balloting, and obviously the relationship with the new government. You and I were talking about that, Adam, is
fascinating.
Relationship currently positioned, we'll ask the question, I suppose, is the honeymoon period over?
Yeah, but it'd be interesting, because obviously Daniel's got that insight, because obviously there's stuff been going on this week with kind of Edmund that we've had on around kind of Ofsted. And it's interesting, kind of those people who have been in the room, we've had those conversations before, so it's really interesting to hear those conversations. All that. So before we kind of carry on, I do want to say that this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore a full range of titles, and use the code JCTTR 2425 for 20% off your order. And you can see that kind of ticking along the bottom there if you kind of want to grab that information. But we're also really pleased to announce that we've got the Teachers Connect events on Saturday, so Saturday the 1st of March, up in Manchester. And I thought we kind of just put this up because it's quite striking, isn't it? The amount of stuff that's going on that day. Obviously, we've got Lee, Kate, and Vic as our kind of headline acts. But as you can see, there's a whole host of things going on in the day, which is absolutely extraordinary, really, for free CPD up in Manchester. So you can see, again, just the depth of stuff that's kind of going on Saturday. We've got our tickets booked. We've got our kind of hotel booked, ready for a few drinks and a bit of a meetup afterwards.
Teachers on tour.
Teachers on tour. Yeah. I've just put a kind of QR code there if you want the kind of information about the event. If you're thinking kind of last minute, maybe you're up in that area and you want to kind of get a last minute ticket, please feel free to join us. Myself and Brent are doing a lunchtime live education tonight around fake news and miscommunication online and how important that is to education. So whilst you're having your lunch, you can pop in to one of the rooms, and me and Brent will be doing a live broadcast. Or if you're just at home, you can tune in to us online. But you can see there's loads of stuff kind of going on there. So I'll just pause that on there. Is there anyone particularly, Brent, that you're kind of keen to?
I
definitely want the Mr. P selfie.
Yeah, he's such a good guy. I know he's primary and I'm secondary, but he just has a way of hitting the nail on the head. I mean, the thing is, teachers always end up making good comedians. You look at a lot of comedians, and there is a strong connection between teachers make good comedians, good actors, and we're on shows, so we develop that kind of personality. But he has a way of cutting across and getting to the nub of the matter, and I do like the way he communicates. And obviously, since the likes of COVID, when he made his little videos, the likes of COVID, I think he's definitely sort of he's been his finger on the pulse of things. So it'll be interesting to see what Lee's going to talk about. But you're looking at the strength of the individuals presenting. They're all lead practitioners. They're all cutting edge. There's a lot of brains in the room. That's a brains trust of educational professionals across the country. And if you can't make it physically, you can still tune into it as well. So don't forget that as well. You can tune in online because some of it is going to be streamed, and of course some of it will be broadcast back as well. So there's plenty of opportunities to if you can't be there physically.
But as always, it's great to be there, isn't it? It's great to be there with everyone, and meet people, shake hands with people, share stories. There's nothing like a kind of good kind of
what usually happens when people meet me at these things, the sort of first comment is, "God, I didn't realize how short you are." That one happened to me at a green conference, my first ever green conference. People I'd been talking to online through COVID and everything else, and obviously I think my personality being a personality that is a bit of a loud personality, I do suffer from the kind of small man, loud voice syndrome. And certainly the comment that I always seem to get from people is, "Thought you'd be taller." I'm like, yeah, I thought I'd be taller too, but it wasn't going to happen in my family. So yeah, so it'd be interesting to see when you see people that you've known, you've seen them online, and you've talked to them, and you actually then meet them. It's a nice thing when you then can follow up with that physical sort of presence and have that conversation with people. But equally, if you can't, then by all means, please tune in and make the connection there as well, or listen back. But it's well worth it, and we're looking forward to that, and that'll be a good
definitely.
weekend.
I'm really kind of excited about it. But as we always do, kind of at the start of the show, I don't know why. Talk about comedians. Me and my wife went to see a comedy night at our local pub on Tuesday night, and she literally said the same. I wonder if there's an actual link here between teachers and comedy. I think there definitely is, because just think of the amount of comedians that have come from the teaching background. You think about Frank Skinner, you got Greg Davis, and then there's just hundreds of them that you can cite.
Although the thing is interesting, I was reading one today. There was a 35-year teacher veteran, and she's basically been sacked because she sort of joked with the child and said to the child, "What would happen if you didn't do your homework? No, you get a whack around the head." And she just said it in jest, like she said it funny, and went, "You get a whack around the head," like that. She's been sacked for that because they took that as aggressive behavior, because the students didn't understand the nuance to it. And you're like, really? Are we reaching that stage where everything you say now? I mean, because one of the best things about our job is having, let's say the word, a bit of banter, a bit of fun.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, I think where some people do get it wrong, because I think the way to do it is it's all in the delivery. Going back to the comedian thing, isn't it? It's all about kind of the setup before. If you've just gone into something like that and get it all wrong, then it does look bad. But sometimes you're about to say something, you go, "Oh, I wonder if I'm going to get cancelled now." You kind of get the kids kind of in that kind of feet, and then it kind of works.
I've had numerous, as a union rep, numerous sort of situations where I'm like, now come on, people, you're taking that out of context. I mean, I even have to. As lessons I used to teach, like I used to say, William the Bastard was the leader of the Norman army. And I used to do it on purpose to teach them context, because he was called William the Bastard. And I'm not swearing right now, just in case you're wondering, I'm not swearing, okay? Don't take me off air, because he was, legitimate.
I've got the mute button tonight. Go, Ron.
You've got the mute. You can mute me at any stage.
I've got the power tonight. And
I always explain and go, that word is used out in that context. That's why William wanted to be William, Duke of Normandy. And of course, you can imagine he wanted to be William the Conqueror. This is why he was called that. It was a derogatory term towards him, but that was his name. And every once in a while, you get the odd sort of comment from a parent going like, "Did you swear in class, Mr. Poole?" "No, I didn't swear in class." Of course, I didn't swear in class. I wouldn't swear in class. I wouldn't walk up to a child just called William, going, "William the Bastard is the leader of the Norman army." You're like, and that's the problem, is people just wanted to sometimes take things out of context and twist things. And I'm going to lie to you, there are some children in school I am extremely careful about what I say around them, and equally my distance to them as well. I think we're getting to that stage now where people can comment on that, where you are very cautious about some people's, because I don't trust them. I really, and I'm going to say it as well.
But again, it's that knowing your own.
And I do not trust their parents. I do not trust some children. And I've got to that point. I have never said that before in public, but I'm going to say it now. I just think there are some horrible people out there who have got an axe to grind, and just sometimes they are out to destroy teachers, destroy the profession, and when they don't get what they want, or they want to play these games. And I think social media has a lot to answer for, because that's the world of social media, where people are aggressively sort of competitive with each other. They go online and they troll each other.
What do you think it started? Do you think it started with these kind of judging panel shows, kind of the X Factor type thing, that everyone feels they've got a right to kind of analyze and judge and that type of thing?
I think now we are public. I mean, I'm honestly going to say something. And I think this is how I've come across it. I think parents now and general public think that we teachers are a public service to be used and abused. I think they think we're there to be got at, undermined, chipped away at it, and judged and second guessed. It's becoming impossible, because everything you do now is scrutinized. And don't get me wrong, you need accountability as a teacher, absolutely. But the amount of times somebody takes it personal, says, "You've done this to my child." Oh, get over yourself. I've got 417 kids. I've got 15 different subjects. Do you think I have a dartboard with your child's face on it? Honestly, some people have a right good, because how I think it is with us is when they, we're not doing our job. We're not doing our job. Little Johnny's not making no progress. Well, I tell you what, get little Johnny, teach him yourself, off you go. And it's getting to that point where I just think enough is enough. We're not public service. We're not customer service. We're doing our best to educate some children despite the nonsense we have to put up with. And then you try and have a bit of humor and build a relationship with people, and then you run the risk of, should you have really said that? The children have misinterpreted that. And you're like, it's going to mean that you are literally
I don't know if you can see that the bottom, Brent. A parent complained of you using the word knackered.
Well, yeah. Parent complaint when I used knackered apparently is some specific meaning. Yes, you could use that as a derogatory term for people of a gypsy background in an Irish setting. But again, context would be important. You didn't turn around and call somebody that. So that actually can be a derogatory term, but somebody would need to know the specific context of that. And that is a very old school, very derogatory term in Ireland for people from the gypsy background. But again, this is when I've had somebody, question my use of the word cabal. And I was using cabal once in the conversation, like, "Oh, you can't say that, that's anti-Semitic." And I went, "What? But because that's, and you just have to be careful of context. I'm like, I didn't mean it that way. Oh, no, you got to be careful of that word because people can misconstrue it." Or I've had that before where I said, you betrayed your thing because you've used the 30 pieces of silver. And I'm a Irish Catholic using a Christian sort of thing about, betrayal, 30 pieces of silver. Well, you got to be careful of that. That could be considered. So you just know, it is the world we're living in, but teaching's even more so, is that people take things out of context and they twist them. And they are, if they want to, they can take what you've said, reinterpret it, and literally spin it. And then what comes back is not the context of what you've said in the classroom. And I think we've all got issues about that. And it reaches a point where I sort of start to think, maybe we need some body cams, like the police do. Do we have to have a camera in our room so that every conversation is recorded? And how horrible would that be if you cannot, in all good conscience, know that everything you say and do could be used against you out of context?
Yeah.
Because you just want to have a little joke. And one of the best things about our job is that humor that we have, that we bring it to the kids. Say that kids like a funny teacher, but can you be a funny teacher if you're going to turn around and worry about being the funny teacher because somebody could twist what you've said out of context and take that joke out of context and get you sacked?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw JLB's comment there.
Yeah.
He's a brave man going for a hussy in a classroom, living life on the edge. JLB.
Yeah, there's exactly, but and I've had that situation where a colleague of mine has used the word, they used the word gorm, for instance, and they didn't call the child gorm, but they used the word gorm, which is old school word for and it's in the diary and it's in but it is again context. Or I had a situation where a colleague recently was wondering what are aura points, and they were kind of like, kids say they've lost aura points, or they having a go at me like, no, it just means you've done something bad. So use it the other way. Just tell them what they've earned. And that's the language barrier when kids have their own language. And then if you say a word that they think is different meaning, you've just got to be very careful of the language they're using. It's becoming a very difficult world to navigate as a teacher at the moment and try and do all those things like build a relationship with children, build up a level of trust, take a little bit of risk. And I can understand why some people play it safe. because you are just one word away being twisted and turned and taken out of context from your, like, for instance, joking with a child and saying, you got a whack around the head. I mean, that's our job. That's been taken as...
and also, I mean, you'll get this as your kids get older. Kind of, we sit around the dinner table and we listen to our daughters talk about school. And obviously, I kind of just tune in a little bit when they're talking about what a teacher said, because I thought, this would be interesting. And then you kind of hear their kind of comments, and then you actually just push a little bit further and they go, yeah, he didn't say anything like that. But if you're a parent who's just half listening, and you're diving in and out of conversations, and then the kid double downs.
Yeah, and then instant communication. Oh, don't even get started on sick meaning good, JBL. I don't even go there with that. That just does my absolute head. And I mean, apparently I've had the beard this week and I've earned more riz with the beard, apparently. But I need my haircut to get more riz. I'm not doing that. I mean, the odd time I will throw the odd skibbity in there to go, all right, stop being skibbity about it. That work. I did it the other day. I went, that work is absolutely skibbity, which basically means it's toilet.
Yeah.
and I thought, you know what, I'm going to use their word again. And he actually, the kid caught on. He went, what are you trying to say about my work? Well, it's skibbity. What's skibbity mean? Well, it's a guy with his head in the toilet that sits there. Are you calling my work, skibbity? He went, yeah, you're working skibbity. You do better. You think, ooh, when I get into trouble, I was explaining that one to their teacher. What did I say to the child? I said his work was skibbity. What does that mean? Nobody knows yet.
Yeah.
It means anything you want them.
Yeah. Anyway, it's obviously created a bit of a stir. But thank you for your contribution. This wasn't the show tonight. We've just kind of gone completely off kilter. But we are going to get back on just to prepping before, Daniel. We've only got 9 minutes left to kind of have a chat. I just want to show you this, Brent, because it really tickled me thinking about kind of comedians online. Just sometimes, like, you come across a really good meme online, and this just really tickled me because I'm just thinking in my head about, sometimes some academy chains take themselves so seriously, and they're trying to write for satire. But when this happens, it's absolutely fantastic. And it just really makes me laugh. This kid holding a cheese stick instead of a pen. It really kind of made me laugh earlier.
I like the look on his face, because the look on his face is like,
yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I've done that. I've really kind of ruined this picture, and I absolutely love it.
He's earned a lot of aura points for that one.
Yeah. But we are the country. Sometimes you wonder, kind of, we spend a lot of times on British values. We don't spend a lot of time talking about satire and not taking things seriously, and kind of that is so built into British culture.
Absolutely, as a non-British person, as an Irish person, I think there's one commonality between a lot of Irish and British people: is sense of humor. Yeah. I mean, some of the most amazing experiences I've had, and some of the best lessons I've ever had, I've literally, you've been laughing and rolling around, going like, what comes out of the kids sometimes, and it is that interchange that you get where you just simply have to turn around and say, you've got me. You take yourself too serious as a teacher and the kids will destroy you. So you sometimes have to roll with it, don't you? And that's the beautiful thing. You're a human being, and you have to be human. And that's the difficulty, what we were saying earlier on. It's harder to be human now when they are dehumanizing you. And that's one of the things I think is starting to happen. We're becoming the teacher, the bad guy, the authority figure. And again, that dehumanization. And you notice that when the kids talk about the teacher they don't like, the way they dehumanize and the way that we're not a person any longer, as if, the right. And that's the kind of problem I think is being, but humor is always, good for the soul, isn't it? And this, over the years, it's one of the things I still love about the job, is that some days you just have to laugh, don't you?
Yeah. So something just comes out of the blue, or someone sees things from such, I think generally kind of we're going to talk a lot about, I think in the next kind of half an hour or so, about a lot of teachers leaving the profession. I did like Mr. P's thing earlier today about finding out that another person's left the profession. But it's one of the things that keeps me in is those moments where it's kind of, it becomes so surreal sometimes, but actually what it is just a young person just processing everything around them.
There are moments where you just
they just make a comment, or they completely misconfigure something to such an extreme that it kind of, you don't know where to go. I mean, I've been in that situation before where I've just had to say, I've just looked, the kids looked at me and I've looked at them and I go, I just don't know. I just don't know. I just don't know what you're talking
Do you know,
about.
there's usually that one kid in class that does it to you. There's usually, every class has that one kid, and you look at the rest of the kids in the class and you go, and they look at you and you're going, it's not just me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And you know, and it is, but it's even the staff room. There's just that one member of staff sometimes that you just look and you go, they did what? They did what? You know, it's the beautiful thing about the human interaction with the job, and that humanity in the job is what really is the most important thing. That's what we can do better.
When I left my last school, there was a couple of people that came up to me kind of as I left, and a couple of the kids, like, this is their genuine comment. I know this is going to sound very David Brent, but they just said, "Oh, it's a shame you're leaving because you're just dead funny." And I thought, oh, okay. I presume that was a good thing, that they'd come at the last minute to kind of, you know, relay that message. They genuinely wanted to tell me that I think they'd enjoyed that experience, and that's what it's all about in some respect, isn't it? That you just think, all right, because kids aren't very good at giving you immediate feedback. They don't go, "Yep, that's good," or "That's good." But sometimes, you know, especially when you leave a place, and I guess
it's worse when they come back 10 years later or 20 years later. I've had one recently, 17 years at last. It's the last taught this person, and they were like, "You remember you did this? Remember you did that?" God, he did. No, I didn't do those things. Yeah, you did. You jumped up on the table and you scared us. I jumped up on the table. Yeah, you jumped up on the table. What was I doing? You were jumping up on the table. Why did I jump up on the table? Did I jump on the table? Yes, apparently you did jump up on the table. And what did I do? Oh, you jumped up on the table. You scared us. I went, wouldn't be doing that one now. You'd be like, no way, I wouldn't be able to jump up on the table at my age. But
union rep and health and safety and all that. You're the one up on the table, Tom Cruise style, jumping up and down.
Well, you know, Captain, my captain, sir. Yeah. Oh, we've got Daniel coming in a couple of minutes, so we're going to
let Daniel coming up. But obviously, kind of as you said, that ballot's kind of up and running. So obviously, the NEU, I should get that right. If they have kind of put this out, kind of out and about. So they've got their pitch, their pitch kind of ready for this pay deal, and you know, obviously first of March, so from Saturday, this is kind of there to kind of start to, I guess that will start coming through the post, I would have thought, this weekend or next week.
Yeah, I mean, all the reps have had all the information, all the reps have had a package sent through. I've noticed our notice board's been changed to the new, you know, the old banners, so it's a whole new fresh sort of set of material. And then the onus this time is more about, last time was about teachers' pay, but this one is particularly more about funding. So there's this slight different emphasis on this campaign as opposed to the previous one, which obviously recruitment retention, but also the previous one focused on the fact that teachers hadn't had a pay increase and the cost of living crisis. Whereas the specifics of this is more about funding fair pay. It's about the funding and where the money will come from if there is to be a teacher sort of increase in wages, or even keeping pace with inflation, because I think the 2.8% would probably keep pace with inflation. That wouldn't be a pay increase, wouldn't be a pay cut very much. Yeah. But the big sticking point is the mood music of talking about where the money comes from. And that's the crux of the matter of, you know, if you were to fund pay increase for teachers, where are you getting the money? Because basically we're being told there's no more money for education. That's what you've got. Yeah. So whatever you do with that is whatever you do with that. Make the best out of it. Which is
certainly in light, just to put this in real context, particularly with the conversation that I guess that Keir Starmer and Donald Trump are going to be having as we speak. In Washington, you know, the looks like the Labour government in particular have signed up. I know some is going to come out of foreign aid, but it's whether we believe ultimately, if there's a crisis somewhere in the world, that foreign aid isn't going to try and keep up and support that. So there might be a need for some further cuts within sectors like education, hospitals, and that type of thing, if they don't change their kind of economic pitch to the country as it stands. If they stick to their rules, then the only way that money is going to come is through kind of austerity through those public services.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a situation where the growth thing hasn't worked for them, because they said that they were going to fund their increases through growth. The economic situation looks a bit more bleak in that. They've blamed the whole previous government's black hole. However, I would question this government, and I've always questioned austerity economics, because there is money out there. We have companies making record profits. We've got energy companies laughing their heads at us. We've got water companies laughing their heads at us. Thankfully, we're not sponsored by any of them. And there is money out there. There always has been money out there. There always will be money out there. This is the sixth wealthiest economy in the world, and I'd never buy into it. For me, it's always been and always will be a political choice, because when they want to find money, saw it during COVID, they could find £350 million, not for us teachers, but to keep people, staying at home. And I'm not questioning that. It was where we were. But at the same time, if there was a war tomorrow, they'd find money for that. They always find money down the back of some secret couch when they want it. It's just about the priorities. So obviously one of the things I'd want to be asking Daniel is how do we get education higher up the priority? Because one of the disappointing things about being a general election candidate was I wanted to talk about education. I wanted to talk about, health. I wanted to talk about the social aspects of things. And really the general election was more about the culture wars and migration. And it was massively sort of skewed towards those ends. And yet the things like education didn't really get much of a say. The big policy was VAT in schools. And funny, the biggest conversation at the moment in the last couple of months has been VAT in private schools, which is 7% of the school's population, not the 93%. And one of the sad realities is that the people fighting for the 7% seem to fight a lot harder than the people who are fighting for the 93%. And I just wish that was the case. And I'm not begrudging people because we've discussed the private school situation. And although in principle, I agree with Labour's sort of wanting the level playing field, I wouldn't have executed the policy the way they've executed the policy. But it seems that the only conversation we're having about education is the impact on private schools. And of course, the SEND crisis is obviously well up the list now, especially with, in our area, we've got local authorities whose conduct has been appalling, absolutely appalling. So media have got to held that. And local media is always full of, I've been fighting 7 years for my child. I've been fighting 7 years for that. So there's been a lot of that in the media. But I suppose one of the things, obviously, we'll be talking with Daniel is how do you cut through that? How do you get the message out that education is chronically underfunded?
Should we go for it? Because Daniel,
let's go for it. Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah,
should we just go for that question?
Start with that question, Daniel. Good evening, Daniel.
Hello, Brent. Hello, Adam. Good evening.
Hello. Good evening. I don't know if you picked up on Brent's question, or Brent, do you want to ask him again? Do you want to go straight in, Brent, with kind of
so in the melee of what we've got, everything going on at the moment, and in the sort of way that education for me, I stood in the general election, wasn't higher up in the priority list, and that which disappointed me. They almost didn't want to talk about education, apart from the one flagship policy, which was the VAT in private schools. It's sort of basically both sides really kept education on the kind of, we're not going to talk about it if you're not going to talk about it. How do you get the cut through? How do you raise the profile? How do we get the general public to notice that we're doing this campaign when the one sort of major thing that talked about at the moment is the VAT in private schools and yes, the SEND crisis? So how do we raise this up? What's the method of getting the attention that I think this deserves?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a very, very good question. The general election was, an immigration election. It was incredibly divisive, and any real policy positions beyond that didn't get the airtime it deserved, particularly when you consider the state of our schools and education, but public services in general. And actually, I think it's going to be harder to do that, actually, because we have people who in the public discourse who suck out the space, even more so now with Donald Trump as president and Elon Musk. They're dominating discourse with through what they post on Twitter. And of course, in the background, there's Nigel Farage still ramping up the culture wars and so on in the background as well. So it is going to be difficult to get it in education up that political agenda. But I do think it is possible, and the way we have to do that is build alliances, and that's what we've been doing through the School Cuts campaign. That's had a good revamp, working alongside Parent Kind, the NGA, ASCL, NAHT. But actually, I think on the issue of this pay and funding award, we are going to have to build alliances with other public services, I think. Because the 2.8% recommendation was a treasury decision. So doctors have been recommended that, nurses and so on. So there are people who want to work with us on trying to reverse this decline, or what would be a decline in pay for this year, and we're going to have to use our voice as a collective.
So you're sort of sorry, because obviously last time, and you know, I've always been, we should have pushed further, but I know the context was different, and I'm always going to be pushing anyway. The thing is that we reached that point and we got as far as the negotiating people felt we got, and we got a good deal out of it, and that proved that strikes worked, because obviously we got the pay award, and it was a decent pay award, and it was the starting point, because that was the thing, we always felt it was a starting point. And the mood music to start with the government seemed quite conciliatory. You had a better relationship. You went in, you came back out. You and Bridget Phillipson seemed to have a bit more, chemistry. There was a lot better feeling. We heard good stuff about Ofsted. Is the honeymoon over, Daniel? Is the honeymoon,
That's a very sharp question, Brent. Is the honeymoon over? We are in.
You and Bridget okay? Are we still okay?
Do you know what? I want to know where the honeymoon was. Where was the honeymoon?
It was a short honeymoon at that.
I mean, credit where credit's due. Gillian Keegan sat on last year's pay award. It stayed on her desk until after the general election. And we've got to remember why that 5.5% pay award was made. It was the first inflation plus pay award that teachers have had for a very long time. And before that, we had this same process of an indicative ballot. Now, credit where credit's due, the Secretary of State was right to implement it and work with us on funding that appropriately. And that signaled a very big reset of the profession, and it was really, really welcome. And then it was right to, remove the single phrase Ofsted judgment. However, we're now a bit further down the lane, aren't we? And Ofsted is looking like it could end up with a framework that makes things worse, not better. And the second pay award that the Secretary of State and the Labour government will be responsible for looks like it will be below inflation. It won't take any steps to address the crisis in recruitment and retention. And, the Secretary of State is saying that in the evidence that schools need to find efficiencies. Now, when this new government were elected, I took to the National Executive of the Union, and they have reaffirmed this strategy multiple times, that we will work with this government absolutely on everything where we can, but we won't be afraid to press them where we must. And so, on the issue of pay and funding this year, we will be absolutely unapologetic about, what pressure we have to put on, because, you're both teachers and you see it every day. It's dire out there at the moment.
Just going back, it's a kind of classic question, Daniel, particularly with kind of what's happened this week. I mentioned to Brent there, there's going to be a lot of pressure, presumably over the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, to meet this money that they're going to put into the armed forces and that type of thing. Public services, again, are going to be put under the spotlights, and you're going to kind of ballot members in that kind of context. So what do you want to talk about in terms of that context? Because it's if the mood music's correct, it's going to look again. It's like a similar story from what we had before. No public money, money's going to go elsewhere because of a priority that's suddenly just come out of the blue. Are the public going to go with us on this within that context?
Well, I think I'm a parent as well as General Secretary of the NEU. I experience as a parent what my son's school's going through. Parents up and down the country are doing that. So I certainly feel that alliances with parents on this issue will remain strong. They were very supportive when we had to take those days of action in 2023. Everybody recognises the dire state of funding in education at the moment, and we can't, I don't think, just, and I never ever stood for General Secretary on this basis. We can't just manage continued decline in education. That it cannot just be a race to the bottom. Now, when we hear the government talk, yes, they're talking about the 2.5% they want to spend on of GDP. They want to spend on the armed forces, but they are also talking a lot about economic growth and the desire to see economic growth and economic prosperity in this country. That is something I think everybody is shared in wanting, but it doesn't come without an educated population. We are crucial to the growth that we want to see in this country. I think there are, there will be a wider public debate, I think, around austerity Mark II, which is what it would be, and around the nation's priorities, whether 2.5% of GDP on the defence is the right spending. I mean, that is a debate that will take place in the public discourse. That where do you cut so that we can put that £13 billion into the armed forces, or the government can, because it's their desire. And we saw some of that yesterday on Wednesday when they cut the foreign aid budget. It'll be other public services next, and that will create more of a discourse in the public domain. But I think we want to educate our young people. We want to avoid global conflict, and yeah, we are going to have to fight for our profession and our children.
Isn't this game? I mean, like this could be a continuous conversation though with pay, couldn't it? I mean, what is the level of pay that we're going to be happy with?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about any kind of alternative solutions? We've heard a lot from the previous government about efficiencies, and I think this kind of, we're talking about AI a lot. How does that kind of come into the workplace? I know some people, Brent said before about his nervousness around AI, because that could potentially mean kind of lower pay, lower skill, and potentially making redundancies. But have we got to a point where we need to kind of reassess the teacher pay thing?
I have serious concerns about the words used about efficiencies, AI, and how AI is going to help us, because don't call me a Luddite when I say this, I do worry that they are lining up our replacement, and they are literally looking to cost cut, because artificial intelligence doesn't come with a pension. Artificial intelligence doesn't come with 13 weeks off. I just get the sense that they think education is there for them to use us in a way that I don't think we want to be used. I think we saw during COVID the push to get us back to work. And you thought, why was the push to get us back to work? Was the push to get us back to work because they knew that we're back at work, schools are back, they get parents back into the offices. And that sort of made me sort of realize that, the government does not value education the way that I believe that education is valued. And yet I think Daniel may have a point about the parents, because what really upsets me is 93% of parents have watched their schools being cut to the bone for the last generation, and yet the amount of noise that's been made for that has been a lot less than when you've seen 7% of people in the VAT for private schools. How much noise has been made for that? So my sort of question is, how do you get that 93% of parents to value education? Because the social contract for me is starting to wane. So what I'd look for in this campaign, Daniel, is how do we energize, how do we put, we're all three of us parents with children at school. So we know this as well as being experienced in school and saying it. But what really disappoints me is that people are more likely to criticize us and criticize teaching and undermine us. And I don't know if that's deliberate, but the cavalry needs to come and help us out here. We need that support. So how's this campaign going to get, as you said, that alliance for parents? How do we get the parents to feel that their schools and education is worth it. You know, how can we really get them involved in the way that the VAT for private schools has energized that sector?
Yeah, so there's a few big questions. So if I start where Adam was about, what would be enough in terms of pay, and should we start to look at other areas to win on, essentially, whether it's workload and so look, as I said, the strategy of the union is to work with the government where we can and press them where we must. So we are pressing them on the issue of pay and funding, but we are also working with them where we can. So we have signed up to the Improving Education Together agreement, the tripartite negotiating body between employers, between the government and between the trade unions. The NEU is part of that, and we are trying to shape that. Around the table of discussion is things like workforce and retention, the SEND crisis, accountability, and so on. I've actually asked that we do start to discuss AI around that table as well, because the profession is completely sick of having things done to it over the past 40 years of neoliberal education, if we're being honest, where things are just imposed from the top down without any real collaboration. Now, AI is interesting because I think it does offer opportunity to free teachers of some of the pointless bureaucratic tasks that they are supposed to do. But who owns it, who controls it, whose interest it operates in, has to be something central, has to be centrally discussed with our profession. How it's used and so on. It can't just be an imposition, and it cannot be used to deprofessionalize, de-skill, or replace a teacher. Now, I share your concerns, Brent, actually, about the direction of travel. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, is saying some terrifying things about technology and education. So he said that this was a few years ago. He was saying that education should just be like a video game, where we need to gamify education, so you can use your imaginations to what his intentions are over the long term around that. And then he has also said teachers are like vaudeville. So vaudeville was like cabaret in the 1800s. Before vaudeville teaching is like vaudeville before Hollywood cinema. So you can see sort of where the big tech giants want to take this. So I do think this is in the context of what we are doing around the issue of pay and funding. We also have to articulate what type of schools, what type of profession, and what type of teaching we want to see. Which is, we want to see smaller class sizes, properly funded, that allow for creativity, for children to develop themselves holistically and become rounded human beings who are able to adapt to a rapidly changing world that have got critical thinking skills. And that requires, highly trained educators that are valued as professionals and rewarded as such. Teaching is a graduate profession. We have to remember that. It allows that space for creativity. We absolutely do not want to see a future in which young people are educated by artificial intelligence. However,
yes.
There are positives. We don't want to be complete. I don't know. Is Philistines the word on it?
Luddites.
Luddites. Yeah. Yeah. There are elements of the technology that we will want to welcome.
Yeah, and it's definitely kind of from a practical point of view, being obviously a classroom teacher. There's things that I do on a kind of daily basis now using AI, and it's just a fantastic tool just to kind of, and it supports me as a teacher kind of as a supporting role. It definitely supports that. So I'd be welcome there. But I think kind of where I was getting at, are there kind of any more kind of alternative solutions which I think you're going to get into in terms of general workload pressures that teachers are really kind of. I think that's the main scream from teachers. It's just I get to a point probably every 4 weeks where I'm absolutely shattered.
Yeah.
And I don't want. I hear this conversation all the time. I don't know if I want to live my life like this, where I'm kind of intermittently being burnt out across the day. I think that's the noise that I hear from a staff room rather than what's in my pay.
Yeah, I mean, I so there's always so people go. So I've had that sort of comment made to me, Adam, like pay's not the issue, it's workload, and so we shouldn't fight on pay. Because it is taking away from the fight on workload. Now, the thing is, and this is perhaps an argument that I need to articulate much more clearly, and the union needs to articulate much more clearly, that those two struggles are not separate struggles. So we can't have a national ballot on the issue of workload, for example, because workload pressures vary from school to school. However, we can have a national ballot on pay because we have nationally agreed pay scale and terms and conditions. In the midst of those national disputes of 23 and last year, we were raising issues of workload in that process. And I don't know if you'll remember, but the workload reduction task force got established by Gillian Keegan. Needless to say, it didn't get very far, but but at least they put down in black and white some of the key drivers of workload. Now, to be honest, if we want to see a real meaningful reduction in workload, then government have to do accountability differently, because we know that Ofsted is such a key driver. Now, we got that initial, yes, accountability is going to be done differently. The single phrase judgment's gone, but now what's being consulted on, let's be honest, will drive up workload much more to higher levels. But also, we can't detach workload from the crisis in funding or the crisis in recruitment and retention. So funding is being held back. That means we don't have the support staff that we need. Young people who are, still recovering from the pandemic and not getting that extra support that they need, whether it's SEND or other pastoral support. There is been a complete erosion of public service that used to exist in local authorities, speech and language, and this is supporting gypsy traveller children, for example. These services are completely gone. So that workload pressure is also put on the teacher now, which has become sort of this extra social worker, everything else. We do everything now.
Can I ask you your thoughts on, because obviously there was a pay increase, but a lot of head teachers then struggle with their budgets. One way to rectify budgets is to get more students in. More students in means more students in the classroom. Therefore, workload goes up. So an increase in pay potentially has also impacted on workload for teachers.
Well, it's been the unfunded nature of the pay awards that have caused that problem. But the other crisis in recruitment and retention is also driving workload. So the workload intensification. This was happening. I was a maths teacher. I'm primary trained when I got elected. I was teaching maths in a secondary PRU, completely outside my subject specialism. Its timetables were changing all the time because people were off. That added to intensity, because you'd have to change what you're doing, and then that fuels the recruitment and retention crisis. To clearly deal with workload, we have to deal with accountability, we have to deal with funding, and we have to deal with the crisis in recruitment and retention. And the crisis in recruitment and retention is partly being driven by pay. You can earn more as a graduate doing jobs where you have working 2 days a week in an office, 3 days a week at home, where you have much more flexibility. But in Scotland, a teacher in their 5th year of teaching is earning 17% more than a teacher in England in their 5th year of teaching.
I've never understood that. I've never understood that. Obviously Northern Ireland's even worse. Northern Ireland's even worse than you talk about the United Kingdom. Well, that's like the thing that's different about this campaign, and it's subtly different, but it is true.
Sorry, Brent, can I just say one more thing on what Daniel just said there about kind of Scotland in particular, because we've done a kind of a podcast on this before, haven't we? That when we went around Glasgow last summer with the kids on one of their kind of open top buses, there's a different feel to education. As we're going around, instead of going to see like Billy Connolly's house where he played that, they're going, and this is the university and this is the school. They're so proud in Scotland of their education that you do that on like a tourist trip. Whereas I
I
don't
I
think
can
you
say
never go around
exactly
and
the
say
same for Northern Ireland.
yeah, you
It's
wouldn't go
very
around and say to
similar in
anyone
Northern
again.
Ireland. Yeah. Not all parts of the UK, Northern Ireland's the same. Sorry, Danny, what I was going to say is that the subtle difference between these campaigns is the
Yeah.
campaign is centered on the fact that the money, if there is to be a pay increase, is going to be taken directly from school budgets with the caveat of you need to find efficiencies, which effectively is saying is you're getting no more new money. And therefore, whatever money you've got, which is already stretched, you're going to have to find potential pay rises, which could lead to then, no people getting their, not just their pay rise, but their, their M1 to M2 won't happen. Their progression won't happen. People who are older, what I worry about is people who are more older and experienced. I've seen this before. Experienced teachers are shoved out, put on capability, and put out to farm because basically they're more expensive. And then unqualified teachers are brought in because they're cheaper. Our agency staff are brought in. Effectively, you could see the death knell of some people's careers because schools will look at numbers and say, we can't afford this teacher. And therefore, is this what really the campaign, the crux of the campaign is about? The fact of the matter is there's no new money for schools, which is the opposite of what we need. Because here's the thing, we need more money, and there's actually going to effectively reduce the amount of money. And in the middle of a recruitment retention crisis, they're actually going to exacerbate that recruitment retention crisis by potentially having some of your best teachers who are more expensive, potentially, with some ruthless multi-academy trusts. Is that the kind of argument that you probably need to make to the teaching profession of this is what could happen if you don't go on strike?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think everybody recognises there's a bit of an existential crisis at the moment in education. Obviously, we absolutely want to see there be no teachers have a fair pay award in which there's no detriment to wider education provision. And for that to happen, there has to be the adequate funding to go along with it. But also, and I sometimes, I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I sometimes talk to teachers about this, they're like, well, okay, well, if it's 2.8%, as long as it's funded, that's okay. And I then tell them about when I meet doctors. And when I talk to doctors about the 2.8% recommendation, and you've got to bear in mind the significant pay awards they had over the last 2 years, they're completely outraged, they're completely insulted by it. And I just want our profession to have that same sort of value in themselves. It is wrong that teacher pay has been frozen or cut year on year, except for pretty much last year, and that is devaluing the profession, diminishing the status, and you are worth that 17% shortfall compared to Scotland. And just how did Scotland get there, and how did they end up with that gap between them and the rest of the United Kingdom? Well, they fought for it. EIS had multiple strikes against a social democratic government in the SNP in Scottish. They waged the campaign over many years and had reasonable pay awards. I think we do have two options. That's reality. We can do nothing, and we can manage decline, in which there will be an unfunded below inflation pay award, in which we know that we'll lose support staff off the back of that. The TLRs will be not as, although they've already vanished pretty much in your average primary school. There'll be less progression through those means. There'll be people getting held back on the pay scale. There'll be all sorts of corner cutting, which we have had to endure for the last 14 years anyway. But it will become the crisis much deeper. Or we can try, and that's what we're trying to do.
I think
we can try and push back.
I think JBL, or one of our commentaries there, is pretty much nailed what you said there, Daniel. Says we have to stop being apologetic about teaching and start being apologists for our profession. I've often said that to Adam, that our altruism, our decency, those of us still left in the profession is sometimes used against us because we feel guilty. We often feel we're never good enough and we're guilty, but that's the nature of what we do as teachers. We always go that extra mile because we care. But it is, and I think you're correct with the alliance with the other public services, because I know people in the fire service, people in the nursing. I've got an NHS wife. We often look at the managed decline in the NHS and the parallels between mental health services as well. But the big problem is, and this is the issue that's starting to happen, is the mission creep. I don't know what my job is any longer, Daniel. I'm a social worker, surrogate father. We're feeding the kids, we're housing the kids, we're clothing the kids. And every week it goes by, we're just doing more and more with less and less. And the government just seem to keep piling it in. Behavior of the children is absolutely terrible. I mean, I've seen behaviors that I cannot cope with because the kids aren't getting the wraparound services, they're not getting the social services. The government seem to think that the school is a one-stop shop. How is the union going to campaign on that issue to sort of strip back and say, here's our job as teachers, this is what school does? Because at the moment, all I keep seeing is more being piled in, and there's a massive mission creep with what we're being asked to do, well outside our comfort zone. And worse than that, because parents are getting angry and they're getting frustrated, the only person they can get to talk about it or take their frustrations out is sometimes us, because they can't talk to the local council, the local MPs no longer. We are getting the brunt of a lot of frustrations, and nothing more sort of, personifies that than the SEND crisis, where some schools are just really with a shoestring budget and a staffing budget just trying to meet the needs of kids, and they just can't do it. So how do we push back on the mission creep about schools? Because if we are to be sort of, you'd expect if you want us to do more, then fund us more. But they want us to do more and fund us less.
Yeah. I know this is going to sound harsh, Daniel, but you got 1 minute for that.
Oh well, it's very difficult. One thing that I do know is that it's going to be very difficult to reinstate the local authority. So we are talking to government about how things can be done differently. Schools are hubs of their community, but that does not mean everything should be piled on the teacher. If we want to see social services and so on, they could be based in the school, but they need to be funded separately. Funded and separate jobs and so on. But that's having a real different look at how architecture really and how we do things. Those things won't come quickly.
Okay, brilliant. As always, Daniel, we really appreciate your time. And
thank you very much.
The ballot is on Saturday, so I guess people should keep getting them in there.
And when will the ballot close, Daniel? The ballot will run
It's 1st of March till the 11th of April. We polled our members about who they voted for in the general election. Largely, as you would imagine, voted Labour, Greens and Lib Dems very strong. Everybody voted for change and wanted this government to do differently. And it is our members' opportunity to send a clear message to this government to keep to their promise.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night, Dan.
So as you can see, JLB's just put nicely there. See you on Saturday. You can listen back to previous Education Tonight shows by clicking on that QR code there. Just to remind you that the Teachers Talk event on Saturday in Manchester. If you haven't got your tickets already, let me just quickly pop up the QR code before we shoot off tonight. Please come and see us. We'll be doing our kind of show there, but there's also loads of stuff going on. I could just quickly put that there as all the list of all the great stuff that is happening over the weekend. Again, as always, look after yourself, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Don't forget, we are sponsored by John Catt as well. The John.
Yes, we are. Yep. We've so John Catt. You can go to JCTT. Oh, sorry, I've completely forgotten there. Just bear with me a minute. JCTTR 2425 to get 20% off your order at John Catt International. So let's take that off. This is the nervous bit now, trying to close down the show then. So I hope you're all well, and we'll see you we'll see you on Saturday live, but we'll also see you at the Teachers Talk radio event on Saturday if that's where you are. Okay. All the best then. Good night, and we'll see you soon. All the best.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused